Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a development economist, co-chair of AU Africa Risk Capacity, amongst other things she's done for our continent and globally. That is why I know that she understands the fact that capital formation is shifting from the entrepreneur who invests in the future to the pension trustee who invests in the past. We're very lucky to have her as our finance minister and coordinating minister for the economy. She believes that when we get our pensions right, you win. Please welcome Dr. Ngozi Iweala.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, the Executive Governors and Deputy Governors, distinguished and honorable members of the House, of the National Assemblies, members of the Federal Executive Council, distinguished delegates and participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is with a deep sense of pride that I welcome you all to Abuja, Nigeria, for this inaugural World Pension Summit, Africa Special. I must first thank His Excellency, Mr. President, for taking out the time to be with us here today. I believe his presence here in a very busy schedule signals the importance his government places on the pensions industry and his commitment to ongoing pension reforms in our country today. I also wish to thank the Director General of our National Pensions Commission, Mrs. Chinelo Anohu-Amazu, and her team for all the work they've done to ensure this year's summit is a success. I've been asked to deliver some comments on the role of pension funds in economic development, and the opportunity to deliver these few remarks is particularly meaningful for me because as finance minister in 2004, when the then President Olusegun Obasanjo launched the reform of our pension system and asked Mr. Fola Adeola to chair the reform committee and for us to try and learn from other countries, in this case we learned from Chile and tried to adapt what they had done, I was one of the happiest people because our pension system had become inefficient and was several trillion naira in arrears. The switch to the contributory pension scheme from the old defined benefits or pay-as-you-go scheme was indeed a paradigm shift in our pension system and was a great achievement. Now again, as finance minister, I'm privileged to see that President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan has consolidated the reforms through his the ongoing reforms, through his support for the establishment of the Pensions Transition Arrangement Department, PTAD, that has enabled us to rationalize and clean up the remnants of our old pay-as-you-go system to make them more efficient, effective, and free from fraud. I want to also congratulate the new DG, Dr. Nelly Meshach, for taking on the difficult job of trying to help us do this, and to thank the DG Pencom for her strong assistance in making this happen. So how can pension funds impact economic development? In simple terms, classical economic theory teaches us that investment in any economy is financed by domestic savings and foreign savings in the form of capital inflows, as these are directly linked to the amount of capital stock available in a country. Capital stock itself is what drives a country's capacity to change, innovate, grow, and develop. However, sustainable economic development in any country requires large long-term investments in infrastructure, agriculture, housing, education, technology, healthcare, and so on. These investments equally require long-term financing, which traditionally banks may provide. But due to some changes in the structure of the financial system, especially in the aftermath of the 2008-2009 global financial crisis, we can't rely solely on banks, finding it difficult to support such long-term financing of projects. Now, institutional investors such as pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds are stepping up their game in providing long-term capital. Peter Drucker, the American educator and writer, once wrote that, quote, capital formation is shifting from the entrepreneur who invests in the future to the pension trustee who invests in the past. With over $70 trillion in assets in 2013, institutional investors like pension funds have the muscles to invest in real productive assets and to drive growth. They even have the muscle now to dictate the nature of the investments, whether socially friendly or environmentally friendly, and to withdraw their investments from countries or from sectors which they feel does not meet their investment objectives. In the OECD region, total pension assets were on average 67% of GDP in 2009. The growth in value of pension funds has been phenomenal in countries like the Netherlands, the UK, and the US, where pension assets amounted to 155, 104, and 74.5% of their 2012 GDP, respectively. In Africa, the story is just emerging. Countries like South Africa have been at it for a long time. Namibia, Nigeria, Kenya, and others are also beginning to come out as countries where pension assets are a significant proportion of GDP. In Nigeria, we have gone from about $4 billion equivalent in 2007 to $25 billion now, about 9.7% of our old GDP and about 5% of our rebased GDP. We are positioned to do more, and I know that with the emerging drive to expand the base, we'll be able to contribute to this as the future emerges. I expect that 2 decades from now, Nigeria should have pension assets exceeding $100 billion. In most economies, pension funds are now considered as very powerful pools of investable funds to stem the trend of recession. For example, the European Union, along with the governments of Ireland, UK, Denmark, and Netherlands, among others, are implementing initiatives to tap into the country's large pools of pension assets to help spur economic growth. These moves have been prompted by 2 factors: constraints in borrowing that several EU countries face in light of their debt crisis, and a volatile market environment that limits institutions' appetites for equities. So there is no doubt, therefore, that pension funds with their size and long-term investment focus can stimulate growth in local economies. However, we are happy to have this Africa Pension Summit because the contribution of African pension funds to the growth of African economies is still rather low. And as I said, it's a low percentage of GDP in many countries, but it's improving. We need to capture a significant proportion of our workforce, especially those in the informal sector, into our pension systems. We need to encourage countries to switch to the contributory pension scheme. Furthermore, we are yet to fully harness the potential of pension funds as a source of development, especially in infrastructure where the financing gaps are huge and where long-term financing is required. Infrastructure financing is still seen largely as part of government's responsibilities, and we don't deny that. But the trend in government's budget demands that we look to pension funds and other sources for this kind of investable pool. So in this regard, in addition to switching to this contributory system, we also need to review regulations and laws governing the investment of pension funds. In Nigeria, for example, we've reviewed our regulations several times, but you recently heard about this last review of the Pension Reform Act of 2004, which the DG spoke about. This has been amended in 2014 to strengthen several aspects of the law. It's not only the strengthening of the punitive aspects for those who would mismanage, misappropriate pension funds, but also to give more flexibility so that we can use our resources as good investable source of good investable pool of savings. In this regard, I would like to thank the National Assembly for approving this, passing this law, Mr. President for signing it, and the Attorney General and the DG for their role in getting it done. It's really a very important law for us. Similarly, the NSIA and GrantCo, a development finance fund, whose key objective is encouraging private sector involvement in domestic financing of infrastructure, are entering into an arrangement to explore the potential creation of a Nigerian credit enhancement facility with the specific objective of attracting the investment interest of a pool of capital for whom safety is paramount, such as the pension funds. So we are not unmindful of the need to ensure that even as we draw on these pension resources, we also have to provide the means to ensure that those who have put their money down get it back with added interest. But this is not enough. More needs to be done, and I know that we will do more in the Nigerian economy and also in Africa to ensure that pensions and pension resources take their rightful place in our development. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Nigerian experience has demonstrated the huge potential in Africa to locally generate long-term finances that will meet our needs for economic development. We need to be mindful of the way in which we craft our laws that guide these resources so that we can also use them to invest within the continent and not outside to ensure our own development. On a final note, let me state that Africa, a continent of 54 unique countries, is beginning to fulfill its promise as the true land of opportunity it has always had the potential to be. As the continent experiences its highest income boom for almost 30 years, with several economies here among the fastest growing in the world, growth in Africa has a great impact on and creates significant opportunities for pensions and pension providers in all African countries. I hope that this inaugural World Pension Summit Africa Special will be a platform for sharing the key lessons learned amongst African countries, focusing on how we can adopt best practices also from emerging and developed economies to ensure that all our workers have security in retirement. As we seek growth and development, as we seek to eradicate poverty, we must also ensure stability, security, and integrity to protect the pensions of African workers. Thank you very much for listening.
Since his coming to power, he had made sure that his mantra remains transformation, transforming every sector of our national life, even transforming the pension sector. The laws are better, the environment more enabling, the people more welcoming. Today we have him here with us to give power, presidential power, to what we're doing here today. It's therefore my honor and pleasure to welcome the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to officially declare this session open.
Thank you. Please be seated. The Excellencies, the governors and deputy governors, representing their governors are here with us. Let me especially thank you, especially those states that have keyed into the pension scheme, and of course some of you will be appreciated this evening an award. No matter what the federal government is doing, if it does not cascade down to the states, our people will never have the required benefits. I appreciate your commitment. Members of the National Assembly here with us, especially the chairs of the pension committees, members of the Federal Executive Council, the founders and chairmen of the World Pension Summit, thank you for being here to drive this process. Our distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, let me warmly welcome you all to this historic first edition of the World Pension Summit, Africa Special. I'm particularly pleased to address this distinguished gathering on an issue of overriding importance to people and families, governments, and nations. Pension is globally recognized, occupies a strategic place in national socio-economic development. It's not only a vital component of social security, also a veritable vehicle for nation building. Indeed, investment in pension has profound impact on the well-being of pensioners, society, and the economy at large. As such, it is imperative that stakeholders in this life-shaping industry engage constantly in dialogue to bolster management frameworks and practices in their respective jurisdictions. It's therefore heartwarming that this summit brings together highly accomplished pension practitioners and experts from Africa and around the world, especially the co-founders, in discussions of various aspects of this subject with emphasis on African perspectives and realities. There is no doubt that the experiences of other countries in pension issues will offer valuable lessons that will assist participants in the review and adjustment of their systems and practices in line with global standards. Indeed, there will be broad lessons that could be drawn from specific history, priorities, and dynamics of various pension jurisdictions. For us here in Nigeria, this meeting is taking place at a time of pronounced transformation in all facets of our national life. In the pension sector, we have also made considerable progress in defining and implementing reforms and instituting governance structures based on best global practices. In 2004, the Pension Reform Act was enacted by the Olusegun Obasanjo's administration to address the recurrent challenges experienced in the administration of pension and to enhance efficiency in the system. Of course, the then finance minister and the DG have already explained that. This reform initiative established a contributory pension scheme for the public and private sectors. In 10 years of sustained policy innovation and meticulous management, these have facilitated confidence and credibility in our pension system and administration. It also strengthened our pension institutions as we transit from a deficit of about 2 trillion naira then, that's about $12.9 billion in 2004, to accumulate pension assets of over 4.21 trillion naira, that is about $27.2 billion by March this year. So you can see that within 10 years, if we could move from a deficit of about 2 trillion naira to a positive of 4.21 trillion, that's about $27.2 billion. That means that we agree with the CMA that in another 2 decades, we should get up to $100 billion. Furthermore, as provided by the Act, we have restructured the system of administration of the defined benefit scheme in the public service by setting up the Pension Transitional Arrangement Department, that CME spoke about and appointing its substantive head, the DG, in order to improve the scheme. Our goal is to digitize pension payments and streamline payment procedures to ensure prompt and ease of payment of pension benefits. 6 days ago, I signed into law the new Pension Reform Act 2014. Let me thank the members of the National Assembly for making it possible, which repealed the 2004 Pension Reform Act. The new law seeks to consolidate the gains of reform, address the identified implementation challenges, and provide the enabling legal environment to facilitate the creation of quality instruments through which pension assets could be best invested for infrastructure and real estate development. I'm confident that these fresh initiatives will assist us to consolidate the remarkable achievements recorded by the National Pension Commission, PENCOM, in the implementation of the contributory pension scheme over the last 10 years for the benefit of contributors and the entire economy. It is our expectation that PENCOM will put in place the necessary regulatory and supervisory framework to facilitate and accelerate the objectives of the reform, most especially ensuring the safety of pension assets and hence workers' security in retirement. I believe that other African countries share similar experiences and reform zeal as Nigeria, and it is encouraging that a number of African countries have visited us to understudy our pension reform, share ideas which we believe will help the continent at large. As we commit to share experiences and seek growth, let me conclude by emphasizing that the protection of pension assets for the payment of retirement benefits as and when due should always be our paramount objective. I'm confident that participants will seize the ample opportunity offered by this inaugural World Pension Summit, Africa Special, to reflect and share experiences on how best to fine-tune African pension system to globally acceptable standards while retaining tailored and unique adaptations. Let me also express our own concerns about some of you who came in to Abuja over the weekend. I think one of the co-founders mentioned that the issues about the airport, because we are just trying to resurface the runway, and I think it caused some problems. I think the coordinating minister of the economy, the FCT minister, and the aviation minister must meet that Abuja's second runway must commence next year. On this note, it is my honor to declare open the inaugural edition of the World Pension Summit, Africa Special. I wish you very fruitful deliberations. Thank you all.
to the king.